And to say that Göbekli Tepe was created by hunter-gatherers, well, I'm sorry, that's just a theory. That's not a fact.
It doesn't seem very
you have a
reasonable
sophisticated
either.
site with astronomical alignments, with hundreds and hundreds of megalithic pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, the world's first perfectly aligned north-south building, which you can only do with astronomy. It's not enough to say, oh, they were just hunter-gatherers. There was something extraordinary.
Stones from a half a mile away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some serious sophistication. I mean, how big were these stones?
Well, the biggest one actually is still in the quarry. They left it because it had a fault in it. They clearly intended to move it. 50 tons. You're looking at 20-foot high objects, and then it's the putting together of them. See, here's the problem. Hunter-gatherer societies are not the kinds of societies that produce large-scale fixed monuments. Why? Because they don't generate a surplus. You can't pay for somebody to become an architect and for of those times, somebody to become an astronomer. You're busy hunting and gathering, and that's what you do. Agriculture generates a surplus, and that is the problem at Göbekli Tepe, because there is no background. This site just appears out of nowhere amidst what appears to be a hunter-gatherer community, but what they're not considering is the possibility we're looking at a technology transfer, that the survivors of a lost civilization who already had all that knowledge came to Göbekli Tepe and used that site as a center of initiation to teach the local hunter-gatherers how to do agriculture. And that's now taken as the beginnings of civilization. I would say it is the reinvention or the remaking of civilization.
So when we're looking back at Sumer or any artifacts we find in ancient Mesopotamia, in that area, Iraq, those are the people that are sort of reinventing and relearning.
Well, that's the thing. Actually, when we talk of Mesopotamia, which means between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Göbekli Tepe is sitting right there in the headwaters between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we cannot separate that from the later cultures that enter history 5,000, 6,000 years ago. They're part of the lineage that descended from Göbekli Tepe times. And what's fascinating about Göbekli Tepe is the way it doesn't fit, the way there's no background to it, that you would expect to see them practicing, learning architectural skills. The oldest stuff should be the worst, and as they carry on, it gets better. That site ran for 1,000 years. The best stuff is the oldest. 1,000 years later, what they were producing wasn't so good. This is a real anomaly, and it needs to be investigated, not mocked by skeptics, but actually explored to consider maybe this does rock the whole paradigm.
And it's kind of ironic that in their desire to get away from the ancient myths and tales in the Bible, they've ignored those ancient myths and tales which all talk about cataclysms.
Well, part of our modern psychology is to imagine that we are somehow so far advanced from our predecessors that we now represent the pinnacle of civilization, and anything that preceded us has to be looked upon almost as, as if the workings of children. It requires a major psychological shift to admit or accept that our ancestors may have been far, far more sophisticated than we had imagined in our 19th century models, which basically still dominate thinking today. And, in Graham's book, he devotes several chapters to the story of one 20th century heretic, J. Harlan Bretz. And his story, to me, kind of encapsulates the whole process of forcing this paradigm shift.